Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. We are Cheap Lazy Naturals, and today, as you can see by the title of this video, I'm going to be giving you some tea on how to grow natural hair, better yet how to retain length. Anyway, so the first thing I want to speak about today is genetics. I don't want to sit here and act like genetics does not play a role when it comes to natural hair, because it definitely does. I mean, doesn't genetics pretty much play a role in everything in life? Anyway, having said that, it doesn't mean that genetics is the only determining factor, at least when it comes to growing your natural hair or retaining length. So to better explain how genetics plays a role in your hair growth or your length retention, I want to speak about a subject that I feel like most people will be able to understand or relate to, which is muscle building or weight loss. Now hear me out. So you know how you get those people that are naturally toned, and if they go to the gym or they start working out, they put on muscle or they get super ripped within no time. I'm sure you know someone like that. I think most of us can agree that it comes down to genetics, right? But now on the other side of the spectrum, you also get people that have a natural predisposition to just be overweight or obese, you know, and majority of the time the reason for that is also genetics, right? Now obviously the latter group will struggle to become lean or to put on muscle and to become ripped, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible though. It just means that they will probably have to work harder or work out more often or just be more patient and wait longer to achieve the same muscular physique as the former group, who can easily get toned and who's naturally lean and muscular. So it's not impossible, it's just harder to achieve. If we even consider the first group of people, at the end of the day, they still need to put in some work. Yes, it might be minimal in comparison to the latter group of people, but they still need to put in some work to, let's say, maintain a six-pack. And now let's say their lifestyle changes drastically and they just start eating for days and they're just eating junk food and eating thousands and thousands of calories worth of junk food, then most likely they will also actually lose that muscle definition and put on some weight. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that genetics is there and it does determine to a certain point how successful you are. So basically the same concept applies to natural hair. You get people that because of their genetics they were able to grow their hair and retain length quite easily, while on the other hand you get people who really struggle to retain length and grow their hair easily. And then obviously you get people in between. These are the extreme cases, right? So bear with me. However, it doesn't mean that the people who struggle to grow their hair and retain length will never be able to achieve the same results as someone who is easily able to retain length and grow their hair. It just means that they will probably have to work harder, or they'll just have to be more patient to see the same results as someone who can easily retain length and grow their hair. Obviously in life there are other determining factors other than genetics when it comes to hair growth and retention, such as your health or the type of medication you're taking. But usually when it comes to those sort of things, one usually needs to address or like sort out those issues properly before they can even try to focus on retaining length and growing their hair. So I personally do classify myself as someone who can easily retain length and grow their hair. However, it doesn't mean that I can just like lay on my back and chill and my hair will flourish. No. As I mentioned in my natural hair journey video, which I'll link over here at the top and down by the description box, there was a phase in my life where I completely neglected my hair. I really wasn't taking care of it at all. The only thing I would do to my hair was straighten it, and I would straighten it about once to twice a day. And yes, my hair didn't break off completely. I still had a decent amount of hair on my head, but my hair was definitely not as healthy or as thick as it is right now, because I wasn't putting in any sort of work towards my hair. And now that I'm actually putting in work towards my hair is flourishing and it's basically reaching its maximum potential. So the following tips I'll be sharing with you guys, I feel like anyone can follow regardless of their genetics, It's just that some people might find that they will take longer to achieve the same results as others, or some people might find that they'll have to be more consistent than others to achieve the same results. But at the end of the day, we can all get the same results. So the first tip of the day is to avoid breakage. Now this tip, I'm gonna break it down into like 4 parts because I feel like there are 4 sub tips to this tip, so please bear with me. So first, I just want to speak about the dangers of breakage and why it's our worst enemy, and also speak about length retention. So the reason why a lot of people feel like their hair isn't growing isn't actually because their hair isn't growing, but rather because they are experiencing a lot of breakage. So sometimes a lot of naturals are experiencing so much breakage that the amount of breakage is equivalent or greater or close to the amount of hair that they grow on a regular basis. So let me try to explain this to you visually. Let's say that each month my hair grows about that much, which it doesn't, but let's just say. So we would expect my hair after a month to be here, right? But now let's say within that month that my hair was supposed to grow down to here, I was mishandling my hair, or I wasn't taking care of my hair, and I actually broke off this amount, which happens to be equivalent to the same amount that my hair usually grows. So let's sum that up. If I gained this amount, but at the same time I lost this amount, it means that the amount that broke off cancels out the amount that grew, so my hair ends up staying in the exact same spot it was a month before. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, guys. But anyway, so basically majority of the time it's not that we are not growing our hair, it's that we are growing our hair but we breaking it. So what's happening is that we are not retaining length. So the key to having long hair is to actually retain length. And the reason why a lot of naturals with type 4 hair experience a lot of breakage is because our ends are the oldest part of our hair. Therefore, they are the weakest, the most fragile, and naturally the most dry parts of our hair. So they tend to break off easily. And type 4 hair, in comparison to other types of hair, is more fragile. It's in general much thinner than hair strands from other types of hair, so it is in general more susceptible to break off. Another reason why type 4 naturals experience a lot of breakage is because our hair has a natural tendency to be knotted up and to tangle up. And the minute we try to comb our hair and our hair has a bunch of tangles and knots, our hair is very susceptible to breaking off, because obviously those knots and tangles get in the way of our hair, and if we don't comb our hair properly, then we will most likely cause breakage. So that's what makes retaining length quite near to impossible. No, I'm joking. That's what makes it hard for a lot of us to retain length, but there are many ways to avoid breakage, and I'm gonna walk you guys through them right now. So the first thing you should be doing to avoid breakage is to keep your hair moisturized. So this comes down to building and maintaining a good hair routine. And we actually have a whole playlist on how to build a good hair routine, so I won't go into too much depth, but I'll link the videos up by the cards or by the description box. But to keep your hair moisturized, there are a couple of procedures that you need to follow, such as pre-pooing your hair before shampooing to ensure that the shampoo does not strip your hair of its moisture, deep conditioning as regular as it is required by your hair to ensure that you are constantly replenishing the moisture and the nutrients to your hair, applying leave-in conditioners or moisturizers to moisturize your hair after you wash your hair, and sealing in that moisture with some sort of sealant like an oil and a butter. And some might find that they actually need to moisturize their hair in between wash days, as their hair loses moisture more quickly. And when it comes to moisturizing your hair with a leave-in conditioner or moisturizing product, make sure that one of the first 3 ingredients on the product list of that product is water. If water is not one of the first 3 ingredients, ideally it should be the first or the first two, but if water is not one of the first three ingredients, then that product is probably not going to do a good job in moisturizing your hair. And most of the times when you're following any of these procedures, we really need to pay attention to our ends, because again, they are the oldest, most fragile and driest part of our hair, so they need the most amount of attention and love. But now the frequency in which you follow the steps that I previously mentioned, or how you do the steps that I previously mentioned, actually comes down to your hair characteristics. So in our playlist that's linked in the cards and in the description box, we speak about how to build a proper hair routine based on your natural hair characteristics. So I would suggest that you take some time to watch that playlist so you can learn how to build a proper routine and learn how to keep your hair moisturized. And the reason why we need to keep our hair moisturized all of the time is because the minute our hair loses moisture, it loses its elasticity and it becomes brittle. And the minute your hair becomes brittle, the more susceptible it is to breaking off whenever you try to comb it or brush it, or even if you just lightly touch on it and pull on your ends, it becomes susceptible to breaking off. And now, to further prevent your hair from breaking off, you need to avoid over manipulating your hair. So manipulation basically refers to the act of handling your hair, being it combing your hair, brushing your hair, tugging on your hair, playing with your hair. Like that all qualifies as manipulation. So over manipulation refers to when you are constantly combing your hair, or you're constantly brushing your hair, or you're constantly playing with your hair, or you're just constantly styling your hair or restyling your hair because you're currently wearing a hairstyle that only lasts a day, so every night you have to restyle your hair. All of that is over manipulation. And now, because type 4 hair is in general more fragile than other hair types, it is already by itself prone to breakage. And when we are constantly over manipulating our hair, we are increasing those chances of breakage. Most of the times we are actually causing a lot of breakage, which starts to show after some time. And as I mentioned before, the ends are our oldest and thus most fragile parts of our hair. Therefore, in general, in comparison to the length of our hair, our ends are extra susceptible to breaking off. So if we're constantly over manipulating our hair, then we are making our ends extra susceptible to breaking off. You know what I'm saying? They're even more susceptible to breaking off. And now for the type 4 hair naturals that have fine thin strands, they are going to be even more susceptible to breakage if they constantly over manipulate their hair. And now the best way to avoid over manipulation is to essentially leave your hair alone. Okay, not completely alone. And what I mean by that is to incorporate protective styles and low manipulation styles as much as possible. So let's talk about protective styles. So protective styles are great because they keep our ends tucked away, and they also discourage us from combing our hair, tugging, or manipulating it in any sort of form. And examples of protective styles are cornrows, braids, wigs, twists, mini twists, flat twists, or whatever. There are a lot of them. And if done correctly, protective styles can really help you retain length. Now, protective styles can really backfire on you if you're not taking care of your hair while it's in a protective style. For example, if you're not moisturizing your hair while it's in the protective style, you're doing no good. And if your protective style is installed too tightly, and if you keep your protective style installed for too long, then it's not gonna help either. But I'm not gonna speak too much about protective styles because, again, we also have a playlist on how to protect a style properly. So I'll link it up here in the cards and in the description box. So please take a look at that if you want some extra tips on how to protect a style properly. Okay, now let's talk about low manipulation hairstyles. So low manipulation styles are a little bit different from protective styles in the sense that they don't tuck away your ends. They're more about creating a hairstyle that limits the amount of touch-up or restyling overall. So examples of this could be a pineapple, a wash and go, a twist out, a braid out, a flexi rod set, any sort of sets like a roller set, high puffs, you name it. So now wearing low manipulative styles can also help you retain length, but now for some people, especially people with finer hair, people who just struggle to retain length in general, it might not be as effective as protective styling would be. As in, the amount of hair that you will retain with low manipulation styles might not be equivalent, it might be significantly less than the amount of hair you would retain with protective styles. Personally, I would say that one should try to create a balance between wearing protective styles and wearing low manipulative styles. I personally don't think that one should live in protective styles for the whole of their lives, because then are you really even enjoying your hair? No. So the next thing you should do to avoid breakage is to only detangle your hair when you have some sort of product with slip on your hair. So slip refers to how lubricated a product makes your hair feel after applying that product to your hair. The more slip a product has, the easier it will be to brush your hair or to comb your hair or to run your fingers down your hair. And because type 4 hair is so curly and coily, the strands have a natural tendency to want to tangle with one another and knot up with one another. So it's essential for us to use a product with slip when it comes to detangling our hair, because the product helps there to be less friction between the strands that are all tangled and knotted against one another, and it also in turn helps us to remove those knots and tangles easily with minimal breakage. And some examples of products with slip are conditioners, most conditioners, so any sort of product that says conditioner, like a deep conditioner or just a conditioner, a leave-in conditioner, most of those products have some form of slip. Or you can also use oils or butters or a mixture of the two to detangle your hair. And the last thing you have to do to avoid breakage is to keep your hair stretched as much as possible, or to wear your hair in a stretched state as much as possible. So as I previously mentioned before, type 4 hair is very curly and coily by nature, so therefore it has the tendency to knot up and to become tangled. And this is especially true when our hair is in its most shrunken state. So by stretching out our hair, or by keeping our hair in a stretched state, we are eliminating some of the shrinkage, that's eliminating a lot of potential knots and tangles, thus eliminating the chances of breakage. Styles like wash and go, like this one where you wash your hair, and after you wash your hair you apply products and you let your hair dry without stretching it, are actually not ideal when it comes to length retention, especially or particularly for type 4 hair naturals, because your hair ends up being in a very shrunken state. So the best thing to do is to rather wear your hair in twist outs or braid outs, flexi rods, roller sets, or any other sort of set, as opposed to a wash and go, because these styles actually provide more stretch than a wash and go does. And for some people, just doing a twist out or a braid out might not be enough to stretch their hair, or might not be a good enough stretch for them to retain length easily. So some people find that they actually have to blow dry their hair, and that's the ideal stretch that their hair needs to retain length. Obviously you don't have to use heat to blow dry your hair. We have a couple of videos which I'll link up here on how to heatlessly stretch your hair, or how to stretch your hair with heat also. And obviously protector styles are another form of stretch styles. And I can tell you that I definitely do notice that when I wear my hair in a wash and go, the amount of tangles and knots that I get when I wear a wash and go is insane. So I actually try not to wear wash and goes too often, because I know that over time, if I wear them too constantly, I can end up suffering from severe breakage due to all the knots and tangles that I will encounter. So the general rule of thumb is the tighter your curls, the tighter your coils, the more you want to keep your hair stretched. And I believe that if you want to retain length as much as possible, you should really try to wear your hair in a stretched state as much as possible. Whew. Okay, so that's it on how to avoid breakage. Now I'm going to move on to the second tip, which is to trim your hair as often as it is required. So when we are trimming our ends, we are essentially getting rid of all of the damage that we have incurred through the wear and tear of our hair. Now this damage can come in the form of split ends, or single strand knot, or feathered ends. So when we wear our hair out loose, our hair is actually in constant contact with the fabric of our clothes, and this actually creates friction because our hair is constantly rubbing against the fabric of our clothes, and over time our ends become damaged because of this friction. And the same is true when it comes to manipulation. Even if you do follow all of the tips that I mentioned before, like keeping your hair moisturized, only manipulating your hair with slip, and not over manipulating your hair, because at some point or another you will wear your hair out loose and you will detangle your hair or restyle your hair. Over time your ends will inevitably become damaged. And obviously if we follow all of the tips that I've already mentioned, then we will prolong the amount of time it takes our ends to get damaged. But what I'm saying is eventually our ends will all get damaged. And now the more you wear your hair out and the more you manipulate your hair, the more wear and tear you will experience. So this will determine how often you trim your hair. But in general, I do believe that everyone should be trimming their hair at least once a year. But now let's say you're someone who wears wash and goes 100% of the time and you are a type 4 hair natural, then you'll probably find that you need to trim your hair approximately 4 times a year, or even more, or probably less. So obviously this will depend from person to person. So the best thing is to actually analyze your ends every now and then. If you look at your ends and you notice that you have a bunch of split ends and you have a bunch of knots, or you have a bunch of feathered ends, then it's probably a sign that you need to trim your hair. If they're still looking healthy, then you probably don't need to trim your hair. So I personally don't wear my hair out too often. I'm in protective styles for majority of the year, so I only trim my hair once to twice a year. And the reason why trimming our hair is so important, better yet the reason why trimming damaged ends is so important, is because if we don't trim those damaged ends, our hair becomes susceptible to breakage. Well, it all comes down to breakage, guys. So for example, if you have a lot of strands with single strand knots, then those strands will become even more susceptible to knotting and tangling up with other strands, thus increasing your chances of breakage. And this is very apparent when you try to detangle your hair. You'll notice that before you trim your hair, and let's say it's been a minute since you trimmed your hair and your ends are in a very bad state, you'll notice that you'll struggle to detangle your hair, and the minute you trim off those ends, it will literally be a breeze. And that's because you've gotten rid of all of those knots that were out there doing the most and causing a bunch of commotion. And now if you do not cut your split ends, what can actually happen in the long run is that the split can actually ride up the length of your strand, and you'll end up with a very fragile strand that can break off at any minute. And another thing that you need to remember when it comes to trimming your hair is making sure that you're using the proper tool. So make sure that you're using a sharp pair of scissors. Ideally make sure that the scissors are meant for cutting hair, as failure to do so can actually cause more damage in the long run. But anyway, that's it for today. If you made it this far, wow, congratulations to you, because I don't know how long this video is, but I'm sure that it's long. All I want to say is to everyone to please be patient when it comes to retaining length and growing your natural hair. As I mentioned, in time everyone will see results. Yes, some people might take longer to see results, while others might take less time to see results, but the important part is that we will all see results within time. And try not to focus too much on length either. The length will eventually come once your hair is healthy, but make sure that your hair is healthy. And your hair can become healthy with all of these tips that I mentioned in this video. And I would suggest that you watch all of the playlists that I recommended, particularly the how to build a hair routine and how to protect a style if you are interested in protector styling. But anyways, I hope you guys found this video informative and helpful, and that you guys will be following these tips, and that we will all be growing healthy natural hair together. I really hope that you guys are encouraged to continue or to start your natural hair journey and to achieve healthy hair. And thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't done so, please give us a like and a comment. I don't know why I did that, but please like this video, comment whatever you want to comment. I feel like I haven't recorded a YouTube video in so long. I don't know how to do that. What is it? Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and we will see you guys on our next video. So bye.